Well, this is one of our good friends in Cellular Healing TV, Todd White from Dry Farm Wines, but he has a new product that I fell in love with called Elixir. Look, I think we talk a lot more information about the benefits of dry farmed wines. We explore the benefits and the health benefits of this new wine, perfect for the holiday season. And you'll hear some stories that Todd and I never told until this episode. So you're going to learn new information, even if you know what a dry farmed wine is. I promise you that. But you're definitely going to hear some great stories. So stay tuned.
I want to give thanks to one of our sponsors, CytoDefend. Look, at a time like this, I think that our immune system and keeping our immune system up right now is more important than ever. I can also tell you that I pay attention to the things that keep my immune system on par and healthy. So glad that CytoDefend is one of our sponsors here on Cell TV, and it's a product that I use, my family uses, and hopefully you'll check it out. And by the way, you can check it out with the link right here below. If you want to try a free bottle, you can actually get a free bottle, just pay the shipping, and I think you'll reorder after that, but check it out.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing CytoDefend product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit freeimmunity.com. Again, that's freeimmunity.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cellular Healing TV. I'm Ashley Smith, and today we welcome a longtime friend of the show, the man behind one of our very favorite companies, Todd White. As the founder of Dry Farm Wines, a writer, speaker, and leader in the organic natural wine movement, Todd has widely educated communities on conscious consumption. Todd is deeply passionate about bringing people together to share love and laughter through natural wine and the health benefits it provides. And he's here to share the newest addition to his incredible service. So let's get started and welcome Todd White and, of course, Dr. Pompa to the show. Welcome, both of you.
Nice. Happy to be here.
Todd, we could throw all the scripts and formality out the window. You and I go a long way back and are good friends. Wine does amazing things. It brings people together for a lifetime. And that's
incredible. Wine brightens the spirit and opens the heart.
One of the things that you always say, and I totally agree with, coming from an Italian family, is, wine just loosens up the conversation. It's hard to have good food without wine. My uncle Lou always, when we were kids, he would say, you just can't eat certain things without a little wine. So he was always pouring a little wine in our kids and all the kids' glasses, because you can't eat that without food, right? Or without the wine, right? And you have to do this wine with that food, and you just can't do it. So of course, as kids, we always got a little bit of wine. And that's probably more of an Italian culture. And some people would say, oh gosh, give a kid wine. But I'll tell you, none of us are alcoholics. And we grew up with a respect for wine around food. And, just the lighthearted conversations it brings around the table. But you bring a wine that does more than that. You bring a wine that brings, yes, great conversation, low in alcohol, because that's one of the things that makes you feel crappy the next day, low in sugar or no sugar, because that makes you feel crappy the next day, no chemicals and glyphosate, because that makes you feel crappy beyond the next day, possibly into a lifetime. So you brought a passionate product that on this show we are passionate about, and that's dry farm wines. But Todd, there's a new product I want to talk about. This show's going out before the holidays. I made certain of it because you got these bottles in our hands and we tried them. And I thought, I've tried some of these really cool sparkling whites, but I don't know. And I poured it, Mary and I fell in love. And I texted you. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do a show on these because I think they're spectacular and the perfect product for the holidays. So anyways, here we are doing the show that I had promised and about a product that I'm passionate. Before we get into the new product, Todd, I think, look, we always have new viewers and they're probably saying, what are they talking about? What is a dry farm? Let's kind of back up. I don't want to bore you with the same questions, but please give us our new viewers, and again, refresh the old, just what is a dry farm wine and what's so special about these wines, despite the fact that you ship them everywhere in the world. I believe you're the largest source of online shipped wine. You're definitely the healthiest source of that. But fill us in once again.
Yeah. So, here's what's happened in the conventional wine business before we get over to Bolexor and the kind of new product, but it's important to understand why dry farm wine exists for your health and what's wrong with conventional wines. And so natural wines, which is what I drink and sell, is a very confusing term to consumers because I say, oh, I sell natural wine. And they're like, well, aren't all wines natural?
Right.
They're not, for a few reasons that I will share. But here's the real problem is Wall Street money and greed. So what happened in the wine industry in the last 30 or 40 years is the same thing that happened in our food supply. So your massive corporate consolidation fueled by Wall Street money. And so in the wine industry, 52% of all US wines are manufactured by just 3 giant conglomerates. And these multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, they don't want you to know that. So they hide behind thousands of brands and labels. So when you go in the grocery store and you look across hundreds or thousands of bottles on that long aisle, or even in bottle shops, most of what you're looking at is factory product. So it's a highly processed factory product that contains additives and sugar and is usually high in alcohol. All problems that we have from a health perspective. So I love wine, but I don't love alcohol. And it surprises people to hear me, who they think is the wine guy who's here to sell wine, say this. Alcohol is a dangerous neurotoxin that deserves respect. And it ruins millions of lives per year. And some people just shouldn't drink at all.
That's true.
Right. And so we really advocate for thinking about what you drink, when you drink it, and how you drink it. Right. And so to really think about that, which is why I only sell lower alcohol wines as low as 7%, nothing higher than 12.5. But what happened is that you had this massive corporate consolidation, 52% of wine.
By the way, before you even go, a typical Napa wine that most people are drinking in the US, what is the alcohol?
15%.
And above, oftentimes. I've seen them above.
Yeah. Of course it can be above. And the thing is, this is another collusion. So one thing, the government and the wine industry have had this long time collusion. And it revolves around a couple of things, what I call the dirty, dark secrets of the wine business. So one is wine additives. So there's 76 additives approved by the FDA for the use in winemaking. Everything I'm going to tell you here and have told you, you can easily verify through a Google search. This is not marketing speak. This is just kind of the facts of the way it is.
Yeah.
And how the wine industry has been successful in keeping this secret about these 76 additives is that there's no contents labeling on wine bottles anywhere in the world, including across Europe. France has said they'll be the first country to put contents labeling known in a couple of years, but that's not happened yet. There's no chance, in my opinion, it will happen in the US anytime, because the alcohol lobby is so powerful in Washington. They don't want a contents label on your wine bottle. It's the largest food group without a contents label. It's a highly processed food. But they don't want the contents label because they don't want you to know what's really in it. They don't want to have to disclose to you that it might contain, let's say, dimethyl dicarbonate, which is a highly toxic chemical that's used to treat the single most common bacterial fault in wine called Brettanomyces. And so this very toxic and powerful chemical treats tens of millions of gallons of wine every year to fix this bacterial fault, which if you don't fix the fault, then basically the wine is spoiled, right? And so this really is all fueled not by trying to make wine better or healthier, but to make it cheaper and faster. And the same thing for irrigation. People say, what is dry farming? Well, dry farming is we don't allow the use of irrigation on the grapevines that produce the wines that we buy. And so,
yeah, which I would argue that makes the roots go, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 feet deep. searching for water, which they're picking up more nutrients, more minerals. I mean, look, I mean, that's why in Italy, I can speak of, I mean, you're not allowed to irrigate at least drinking wine.
Well, most European regions, appellations, and countries, it's illegal to irrigate.
Yeah.
In most of Europe, because Europeans who've been growing wine for 3,000 years already know what we know, which is irrigated fruit produces a less healthy vine, a less healthy fruit with lower quality and character. It might not surprise you when you fill a grapeberry full of water, you end up with lower everything because everything's diluted. The polyphenols are diluted. The character of the grape is diluted. The character of the flavor is diluted. And the other problem with irrigation is that when you have a grapeberry filled with water, then you have to pick the fruit later, riper, higher in sugar to get proper phenolic flavoring. And so then you end up with a high sugar fruit. What does high sugar fruit produce? High alcohol wine. Right. Because when you make wine, yeast eat the sugar. The byproduct of that is ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. The more sugar there is to eat, the higher the corresponding alcohol will come at the end of fermentation.
I mean, that's why in general, European wines have less alcohol, less sugar, obviously, just because of the process of not irrigating, you know. And then I would argue too, I mean, I mean, look, this is all happening because of money, if you think about it, right? But
of course, it's all rooted in money.
Yeah, I mean, so Napa,
all of these problems across our food source, across what's been, you know, an assault on everything is driven by money. So it's, you know, it's hard. It takes real effort and focus and integrity to do the right thing where product is concerned, and it's not the most profitable way to do it. It's cheaper and faster to use irrigation. It's cheaper and faster to use chemical farming.
Of course, yeah. But if you're not irrigating, I mean, if you're not dry farming and you're irrigating, then you're going to be forced to use chemicals because the plant's not as healthy. And if the plant's not as healthy, then you're going to deal with more pests, more funguses, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you're going to get, well, you're also going to be feeding it nitrogen from the same tube that feeds it water, right? And so this stunts the growth of the roots because the roots, as you mentioned earlier, see, the roots of an irrigated grapevine are about 4 feet in diameter, about 3 or 4 feet deep, because they get all of their source of nutrient and water from this little tube that's just above the trunk. You've seen them all over the United States. Less than 1% of U.S. vineyards are irrigated or dry farmed in the United States. Super, super small number. And the crazy thing is that didn't start. Irrigation didn't start in grape farming until the 1970s. Prior to that, everything was dry farm. Look, grapevines have been living irrigation free in some of the harshest climates on the planet, like Sicily as an example, where, as you know, it's volcanic, it's very rocky, it is super dry and hot, right? And grapevines have been flourishing on the island of Sicily, where there are some beautiful natural wines made there without irrigation, right? And so you'll commonly, even the University of Davis, which is the leading enology school in California, teaches that you cannot dry farm in California. That's not true because there are some vineyards that are dry farmed.
Yeah.
But they actually teach that you can't dry farm and because it's too hot and too dry. And this California is not near as hot or dry as, say, Sicily or Greece.
What's the percentage that dry farm in Napa?
Like 1%, less than 1%.
Yeah. So, like you said,
there's a half a dozen people you could name who, and not all of them are exclusively dry farmed. Just some of their vineyards are. But there's only a handful of people who, I mean, the leader, of course, is John Williams at Frog Sleep. I mean, he's led the dry farming movement. They have 100% certified organic and certified dry farming. They don't make natural wine. So, you know, this is another confusing thing. See, natural wine is always organic. but not all organic wines are natural. So, and that really has to do with whether or not they're additive free and whether or not they are fermenting with wild native indigenous yeast. And then also, you know this because you've drank some dry farm wines. Not let me restate. You've drank some irrigation free wines from Napa Valley. Mm-hmm. But here's the other thing that's just different about a natural wine is that, and I have a lot of friends who make wines in the Napa Valley, but there's a style of winemaking in California that's just heavy-handed. You know, it's
very. Well, I mean, I believe that it's heavy-handed. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I was saying, is it partly heavy-handed because they have to be, meaning that they care about the taste of their wine? Obviously, they pay a lot of money for that property out there. They want to make a profit. They want to make a good wine. But when you're irrigating, you're already starting at a deficit, and therefore it seems as though to me, and I've toured a lot of the vineyards, they bring in some very clever biochemists, which brings the heavy hand to try to make a better product. Is that the case?
Well, it's really what I'd call, you know, this goes back to really Robert Parker, who was the most formidable wine critic in history. And Robert Parker,
you have a Parker score,
right? But he invented the 100-point score.
Yeah,
right. You sell a lot of wine at high prices, and so, you know, the winemaker's responsibility to the landowner and to is to sell wine. And one of the surest method for selling high price wines, and with the price of California land, you have to sell high price wines, right? And for the cost of fruit there, which is also super expensive. So the surest path to selling a high price wine is to get a high rating, you know, from an expert. And in this particular case, Robert Parker was the most influential. Robert Parker has a style of wine that he likes that is very extracted, very rich, very heavy, very bold, very dark.
Sounds like a California Napa cab.
Right. Well, so everybody started making the same style of wine, also higher alcohol, because alcohol adds density to wine, and a lot of new French oak, you know, a lot of new oak, which also adds other components to the wine that we don't think are necessarily good for you. Mm-hmm. So this just became chasing a rating, you know, so you wanted to get a 90-point plus rating from Parker, and that resulted. So there was a style of wine that was established, and there were many, you know, like Robert Mondavi, who's now deceased, but you know, when this was all happening in the 80s and 90s, I mean, he was rebelling against it. He was saying, you know, we don't want to make. Of course, Mondavi's not owned by Mondavi's anymore, but we don't want to make this style of wine. We want to make a finessed, balanced style of wine, right? That has old world characters.
Right.
And so, you know, there was a big debate, and the big wine style won because that's what was getting the ratings. And,
well, that's ultimately at the end of the day, that's what's selling then, right? If it's getting the ratings and people are buying them, then you're going to see everything move in that direction. That's
so then it just become, but you know, natural wines are not made that way. So they're not extracted like that. They're sugar-free in our case, and sugar adds mouthfeel and kind of finish, and alcohol adds density and weight, right? So when you drink a natural wine that's lower in alcohol, it's actually quite refreshing. It's not at all that experience of that heaviness. Mm-hmm. And if your diet, you know, if you eat in a way, if you eat whole foods, you know, if you eat unprocessed food, and if you eat top quality beef and top quality fish and top quality vegetables, then in the style that we eat, and I fast every day. I only eat once per day, and then I'm starting a 3-day water fast tomorrow. And so when you eat in this way, you can't drink these heavy kind of extracted wines. You want something that is lighter and fresher and more reflective of the way your palate is.
Mm-hmm.
And so the problem is when these people have these unhealthy palates, they need this big, bold wine to kind of cut through the deadness that is their palate. People's palate gets killed by processed foods and excess amounts of sugar, right? And so when you eat whole real food and get off the sugar thing and get off the processed chemicals, your palate becomes alive. You'll restore your palate.
I've heard people drink the dry farm wines and say, oh, it tastes watery to me. And I know exactly what they've been drinking when they make the comment, because to me, it's refreshing and the flavors pop out,
Well, you feel better too.
Oh, of course you feel better, but again, I say, just give it time and you'll go back to those wines. And
this is common. We hear this, like, all these wines are thin, they're kind of watery. It's like, well, when you remove alcohol and you remove all these chemicals and you remove sugar, then you get down to real honest, this is what wine tastes like that your grandfather would have made 100 years ago in his garage, right? It's just like,
that's right.
That's what it tastes like. And see, what you've been drinking isn't real honest wine.
That's right.
It's a factory product. It's a manipulated product that's been made to appeal to this rated palate. So anyway, it's just you just feel so much better and they taste so much better.
You can leave sugar behind. You kill the yeast off early, leave some sugar behind. That's a Napa trick. It makes this bold flavor. That's why cooks put sugar in things, right? It boldens the flavor, etc. So it's a cheat, but unfortunately that cheat makes you feel like crap the next day. Let's review for people. And by the way, I want to be clear. Todd is not a winemaker. Dry Farm Wines, the name of his company, he shops old world wines. And with that, he has a list of things that to make it to be a dry farm wine, you're going to have to make it pass these categories.
Yeah, so we have very strict health criteria about how we view wine. First of all, it's got to be delicious. But after that, it has to be dry farmed, which is no irrigation, lower in alcohol, 12.5% or below, sugar-free, lab tested by us. And additive free. So we don't allow these additives to be put in. So the natural wine movement has exploded in recent years because everybody in the health community has become very obsessed with them, and people in the farm to table community and the chefs who are interested in serving kind of organic food and knowing the source of their food they also want to know the same thing about their wine. Right. And so there's been this huge explosion in natural wines. It's still a very small category inside the bigger wine sphere, but there a lot of people have taken interest in it. We've educated millions of people about why they should be drinking natural wines and why they shouldn't be drinking these conventional wines. And so what we've done now is we've taken it another step. So we've started introducing other lab tested, high quality natural products that can also, like olive oil. So now we have, a lab tested certified olive oil that's grown by the same organic and biodynamic growers that grow our wine. And then we also introduced this year a super low alcohol botanical wine that we call Bolexor, which stands for a botanical elixir. So it's actually a natural wine that has been steeped and blended and brewed with all botanical teas, organic sun-dried teas, elderflower, rose hips, dandelion, lavender.
Yeah.
So these botanicals are bringing their unique organic health properties.
Yeah.
In alongside with the wine, because here what we discovered.
I think they're perfect for the holidays, by the way. That's why I said, okay, we have to do this show, before the holidays. For sure. Because during the holidays, we're drinking so much. These are super low alcohol. So they're in the 6 to 7, 8% alcohol range, generally
average around 7%. So you can drink a lot more frequently of them with less of the negative impacts that come from just from drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I love wine. I don't love alcohol. So I'm always looking for opportunities to drink less alcohol and still have like a refreshing wine experience. And so what we discovered is when you removed all this alcohol, it didn't taste like wine anymore. Right. So once you get below about 9%, once you get below 9%, wine doesn't start to taste like wine anymore. It starts to taste like just a beverage. And so we were like, okay, well, let's enhance this with natural healing properties of botanicals and bring a blended flavor to it that gave it more complexity instead of tasting too watered down from having removed all this alcohol. So that's sort of how we combine these. This is how we kind of combine these two together, and to create this botanical elixir. So, and it's delicious. It's made in Austria for us by a young Austrian couple who kind of introduced us to it. And
yeah, that was my question. Who's making it for you? Okay, you answered that.
Yeah, just this young Austrian couple. We stumbled upon it a few years ago. They were making the wife. They were in their late 20s, and they were going to have a baby. They were going to get pregnant, and she wanted to make something that she could drink during her pregnancy, or at stages during her pregnancy, which was super low alcohol. So she made this sparkling wine out of dried elderflowers, and they didn't have hardly any of it. They made a little bit of it for themselves, and they shared it with us. And we were like, oh, wow, we have an audience for this because our people love low alcohol products, or a percentage of them do. Now, let me be perfectly clear. Most of our customers still buy mostly natural wine, right, at more traditional products from us, right? They just like this Bolexor is fun. It's easy for some daytime drinking, like if you having an earlier dinner or late lunch. And I don't normally recommend people drink during the daytime. It's going to happen. So then they drink this lower alcohol botanical elixir.
Yeah.
And this have a much better outcome.
And let me be clear. Ashley will put the link in to order Dry Farm wines in every state, but a few. You can order them. And you can order all of the typical Dry Farm wines plus the Bolexor, the new wine. So, and by the way, you do combination orders, right? You can order a few of those.
Yeah, you can order in any combination you want, of course.
And of course, you ship monthly orders, people. Yeah, and I think you price your wines at such a reasonable price that it makes.
Yeah, let's talk about pricing because it's really important, because natural wines are not expensive. Right. These are all handcrafted fine wine products, and they average $26 a bottle, and that includes shipping. Right. $26 including shipping, because wine's expensive to ship because it's heavy. And it has to be refrigerated. And so it's just difficult to move it around, and it's more expensive. But we pay shipping on all of our products, and even then it's $26 a bottle. And so that's just an astounding value. Natural wines are not expensive. The reason they're not expensive is because nobody knows what they are. Yeah. There's no natural wine brand because nobody can make natural wines in big enough quantities to create quote unquote a brand. Right. So there's super good value. And uniquely we try to make it as simple as possible. All of our wines are exactly the same price. Doesn't matter what you buy.
Yeah.
Sparkling, rosé, orange, Bolexor is all the same price. Every single bottle is the same price. Just makes it super simple.
Makes it easy. Yeah.
And about 85% of our sales come from our wine club members who are subscribers. Because our goal really starting out as a wine club was to help people who drink on the regular. Because the more you drink, the more often you drink, the more help you need, right? In order to stay healthy. And so I was drinking daily. I still drink wine daily unless I'm on an extended water fast. I mentioned to you I'm starting one tomorrow for 3 days, which is not a terribly long. 3 days I find really works great for me. By the end of the third day, I feel like I've gotten most of the benefit that
Well, you know
I'm
what? You,
seeking.
you and I can fast for 3 days because I'm in max autophagy day one because we're so metabolically flexible. We fat adapted very quickly, whereas most people take a few extra days to get there. Whereas we can get there very
I
rapidly.
can
So
feel like by day 3, I've kind of like settled out of what I think is like most of the churning,
yeah,
right? Like if I go day 4 or 5, I don't feel like I'm getting as much benefit as I got in the first 3 days.
yeah.
And so for me, I'm doing these like every other week right now, particularly during the holiday season. And I've just been
By the
really,
way, it's what I recommend. I in the holidays I feast famine. I mean, it's part of my concept, right? But you feast. When you feast, you feast. When you famine, you famine. So doing a few 3 day fasts during the holidays, it's how you enjoy the feast. So good
yeah,
job.
it's also
Bravo.
indicative of sort of ancestrally how we were able to eat
Absolutely.
and, cycle in and out and maintain metabolic flexibility and adaptability and fat adaptability after, experimenting with low carb. But, feasting, as you've mentioned, maintaining this metabolic flexibility and adaptability is very important. I think most thought leaders in the space have come to this concept. You were among the first, but maybe the first. But Mark Sisson is like super big on it now. Certainly wasn't when you were beginning.
Yeah.
At that point, he was still primal. Then he went keto, and now he's kind of like, okay, well, this is all about metabolic flexibility.
Yeah.
You were certainly the leader in that.
Yeah, yeah. I just called it diet variation, and it was just something that I knew worked. And I think in our industry we just saw a lot of people trapped into their what helped them, right? Of course, we see it with vegans, vegetarians, but then we started seeing it with the keto people. We started seeing it with the paleo people, and it's like, well, it's a little bit of flexibility. Diet variation is what our ancestors did, and lo and behold, it actually helps. It actually hormonally optimizes you when you switch your diet around feast and famine. I always tell people, I have to remind in our space that the feast is as important as the famine. In some spaces, you have to remind them that the famine is as important as the feast.
Right.
The combination is good. But yeah, look, I mean, the wine is part of it. It's part of what makes the feasts fun. And, having a healthy wine, you can feast healthy. I think that's the part of the message here. And you don't have to skimp on something as wonderful as wine when we know that you found the good wines for us. So bravo for that too.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey. And you and I have drank a lot of wine together. So I mean, it's and we poured a lot of wine at your events, and it's just been an extraordinary kind of opportunity to educate so many doctors, so many practitioners on why this is better, and for them to experience it, which was one of the beautiful things about being able to pour wine at so many of your events, is that I love the proverb, to feel is to understand. Yeah. Right. And it's because there's so much conflicting information out there about what's good for us and what's not, or what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And so, but for people to experience what this feels like, I apply this concept to all kinds of biohacks that there's just not sufficient scientific proof, or that I just say, to feel is to understand. And when you feel something is working, that's the reason I love to share wine with people, because they're like, oh my gosh, this is really different. And they come back the next day after partying with us all night, and they're like, I feel great. This is like completely different, particularly women with red wine, right? Women particularly have a difficult time with the way red wines are made today, this very extracted and all the additives and manipulations that go into it. Red wines, for this reason, have a very significant negative impact on many women. And you know this because they come up to me and they're like, at an event, they're like, oh, I love red wine, but I can't have any. Let me try your white wine. I was like, you can have this red wine. It's not going to do the same thing to you that you're accustomed to. And plus it has all the health benefits of polyphenols, flavonoids,
Yeah.
and antiflavonoids. But yeah, it's been a great journey, brother. I bet we're going to drink a lot more wine looking forward. So
Oh, hi. I hope so. I hope so because I always enjoy it. Remember that one time, gosh, we were out in Napa for a different, I think it was one of our events, our UAC events. You took us to dinner, me and some of our doctors. It was just a small,
about 12 of you. We had a big dinner.
yes,
Bistro Don Giovanni.
that's right. You remembered. I tell you, you had some of the best darn wines that I had ever had. I remember that dinner. The food was extraordinary, but I particularly remember some of those wines. I don't know if you tapped into your private store of like your favorites over the last couple of years or what, but holy cow. Maybe I was just in that mood for good wine that night. I don't know, but that was extraordinary.
Wine is about setting, where you are, who you're with, like, of course they were great wines, but, and the thing is, with natural wines, they're made in such small quantities, we sell out. I mean, they just go so fast. And then, there are ones that I happen to like personally, and I taste every wine that we sell.
Yeah.
And so, there are ones that I personally like that sometimes we can't even get. It's just, they're super allocated. Maybe I can only get like a few cases and I just keep it for myself. Right. And then
I think we
share
tapped
it with
into
my
that.
friends. What's that?
I think we tapped into some of those that night. I remember one from Austria. You mentioned Austria, right, where the Elixirs are from, but I remember one from Austria that I was like, when do I get this in my order? You're like, you're not going to get that one in your order. I think you're fine.
Yeah, it's the problem is, it's like sometimes they're just so extraordinary that they're so highly allocated that, we just can't get them.
Yeah.
And at that point too, oftentimes they're more expensive and they don't fit our regular program, and but you can't get them anyway. And so it's kind of like it's a privilege of being in the business. You kind of stumble across these things sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you like pull them up into your private library. But listen, you get our wines. They're all great. They're all delicious. It's just like, but again, it's setting. You're in a special place. You got special friends with special food. And then the wine starts to taste more special, so it's a combination of things.
Yeah, well, it is. You're right. I mean, it just sets the stage.
And then the right serving temperature. Most people serve red wines too warm, right? And so red wine should be served between 55 and 60 degrees. Most people serve red wine at room temperature. It's simply too warm, and it does the wine not a great service. So having wine at proper serving temperatures is super critically important as well. And so this is all these little things. They're having proper glassware, with enough headspace, with a bowl with enough headspace for the wine to express its perfume and aromatics, because the aromatics of wine are 50% of the enjoyment. And so if you have a glass that's too small or a glass that has too much wine in it. So this is another problem. When you go into a restaurant, you order a glass of wine. They're going to pour too much wine in the glass, right? You can't really enjoy it because it's too high up in the glass. And typically the glasses are a little smaller because they want the glass to appear full, so you don't think you got a short pour. Right. And so, but this isn't contributing to your wine experience. And so you got to have enough headspace. That's the space in the top of the glass before the wine. So, one hack to that is to get an empty glass and just pour some off. The other thing is servers will also overfill your glass, even if it's from your own bottle.
Yes.
Right. They're just wired that way.
Yeah, because they want to be doing their job. And
right. They always want to be filling your glass up, right? Because that's their job of like, whoa, I'll serve myself. Right.
One of the things I do, I sit there and I spin my red wine, right? I sit there and spin up. My son said, Dad, why are you always spinning your wine? Right? It's become a habit because it oxygenates the wine, right? Sure. It brings out the flavor. And of course, I'm constantly smelling it because I have a better nose than I do a palate. Right?
Listen, you can tell more from a wine from smelling than tasting. I can tell if a wine's flawed just from smelling. I don't need to taste it.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
Right. And so I actually think you can tell more about the wine from its aromatics
Yes.
than tasting it.
A funny story, right? So when our whole family had COVID, right, and my wife's only symptom was she lost her sense of smell, which
Right.
you know
Oof, that's
she
tough.
that was it. That was it, right? So me and the kids, we had fever for a couple days, right, and I didn't lose my sense of smell or taste, right? However, I must have been affected slightly because I kept smelling wines going, it's turned. And,
Right.
so I literally dumped a bottle out, right? After and I even tasted it and said, oh, it's turned, right? So another one, same bottle, opened it up. I said, it's turned. My daughter poured some and tasted. She said, no, it's fine, right? So I'm like, how can I be wrong? And I handed it to someone else and they're like, no, it's fine, right? So I realized it was probably a month that all wine tasted the same to me.
Right.
That was my horrible COVID experience. It was like, oh my gosh, it's like I can't enjoy wine, right? So I probably
is
have
pretty
people out
terrible
there going,
experience.
that was me, right?
That is a pretty terrible experience. I hate to hear that you couldn't enjoy wine.
Yeah, right. I sound like a total snob actually as I hear myself say that because people got very sick from the virus. So I feel poorly for anyone who got sick, but I really was funny to me because I was insisting that these wines were like absolutely turned, right? So,
Nice.
well, look, Todd, we love you. We appreciate you coming on, and y'all can order from the link here in the show. The Bo Elixir is the new wine that I think is perfect for the holidays. So make sure you get some of those, but enjoy the wines that you traveled the world to find for us. And by the way, how did COVID affect that travel? What did you do? I meant to ask you that question.
Well, when the lockdown happened, I mean, when it was announced that flights were going to shut down from Europe, we actually had 4 people on the ground who we had to get emergency flights out for. So we brought them home. Basically, we haven't 2020. We were scheduled to go this month, and we were going to be based in Austria, and Austrian government just shut down travel again, and a number of cities have been locked down. So we canceled that trip, and we've just been having a bunch of samples come over DHL. So people send us samples, and our business goes on, and we've adapted like many other people. We miss being there. I just did a talk, actually a virtual talk on natural wines in London today. So we're adapting.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you adapted, and praise God for that. But my internet connection, because I'm not on my main computer, is actually just starting to go wonky. So good time to end the show. Thank you for being on.
Love you. Peace out. And look forward to drinking some wine with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man.
Hey, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Cyto Detox. Look, podcasts cost money. There's a lot of production going around this, but we are grateful to have Cyto Detox as one of the sponsors. It's so easy for me to talk about the product because myself and my family use it constantly as we practice what I preach. For over 15 years, I've talked about and taught doctors and the public about cellular detox. And I'll tell you, Cyto was a breakthrough. Cyto was a breakthrough for us. And it's changed so many lives. So we're grateful that they sponsor Cellular Healing TV. It makes sense, doesn't it? They should.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing Cyto Detox product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit detoxoffer.com. Again, that's detoxoffer.com. Well, that's it for this week. The materials and content within this podcast are intended as general information only and are not to be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you would like to purchase some of the supplements mentioned on this show, please visit the site as seen on CHTV.com and use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. Again, that's as seen on CHTV.com. Use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. And as always, thanks for listening.